Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and it's that time. It's the end of the year when we get to figure out which booze sold in the state. And I actually reached out to the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, or whatever they're called, and asked them, like, what did we actually sell this year? And they gave me the numbers, which is really nice of them. And they gave me, this is kind of cool, so I don't think I've seen this before. They gave me a top 5 domestic, and a top 5 state of Iowa, and a top 5 national. So we're going to go over that, but we're going to do that with a very special guest, talk about what booze you like in Iowa. And we have Scott Bush in here to do just that, the founder of Foundry Distillery. Welcome to the Iowa Podcast
Thank
studio.
you, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you in here. We met during the Templeton Rye days.
Indeed.
So you were one of the guys that did the Templeton Rye thing, and now you're doing the Foundry Distillery thing.
I was the guy, but go ahead.
Yes. And so Foundry Distillery, obviously a different beast.
Yep.
West Des Moines base. Is it technically West Des Moines, right? Yeah. So first, it's a noticeable decline this year. This is what I want to add. It's very slight as far as the state numbers, but there is a little bit of decline in alcohol sales in Iowa.
Yep.
That's my first question. What happened?
Well, there's absolutely, it's not just in Iowa, it's nationwide.
It's nationwide. Oh.
I think we're seeing, the impact of, the seltzers, which has been going on for a while, but then the THC stuff as well, I think is just dragging down overall spirit sales in Iowa and around the country. Sure. Beer as well, in fact.
THC sales?
Drinks.
Yeah,
THC drinks.
Of course. And that is actually cutting into alcohol sales.
Certainly.
No way.
Certainly.
And you said obviously alcoholic seltzers.
Yep.
Or not this stuff. If you're watching online, not this seltzer. You're talking about the alcoholic seltzers also cutting into booze sales as well.
Yep.
Right. So is this the first time it's declined?
I believe so. Yeah. I think, probably not the first time ever.
Well,
but
yeah.
First time in the last many years. I think there's big picture kind of macroeconomic things that are leading towards that. And, calories and people just switching away from traditional alcohol into these other areas.
Is it anything to do with like Gen Zers? Because Gen Zers, and there's kind of this no booze movement.
Yeah, that too. I didn't even mention that, but I think there's just younger people in general maybe aren't drinking at all. So that's obviously a change for my day.
Yeah, no kidding. And so I wanted to go over the top list with you and see if you could guess where they were. But I do have to confront Iowans on something. You're in trouble. All of you are in trouble, like seriously. But anyway, okay, so top liquor sales. This is a pop quiz.
Okay.
Scott has no idea I'm going to do this to him. But top liquor, like by choice, by style, maybe that's the flavor. I don't know. Like you have your bourbons and your vodkas and your tequilas. What do you think the top number 1 choice of Iowans was for 2024?
The brand or the category?
Category.
Vodka.
Yes. Good. How about number 2? What was number 2?
My guess would be it's spiced rum.
Spiced rum is in the top 5.
Okay. 2 would be Canadian whiskey.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Number 3.
I would say vodka.
Vodka. Wait, vodka for 1 and 3?
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Really? Is that possible?
Well, are we doing brands or are we doing I'm sorry. We're doing full categories.
Full categories.
So vodka, Canadian whiskey.
Yes. Yeah. You got those. Yep.
Third would be bourbon.
Yeah. Domestic whiskey. Yep. That's what they call it. Domestic with weird
type
weird
of
guys.
Whiskey.
Weird. And then next is rum. And then what's the number 5? This one I would have never guessed in a billion years.
I bet it's, distilled specialty distilled spirit or liqueur.
And
Fireball.
So number 5 is cordials. Is that what that
cordial.
is?
Well,
dude,
Yeah.
I'm stunned. I didn't think you'd get any of those. So maybe.
What do you think I've been doing the last 20 years, man?
Yes. Wow. Okay. I mean, maybe I just don't know enough about this world. And so the top 5 brands, we're not going to do this all day because then the listeners are going to tune out.
Hawkeye Vodka.
No.
Tito's?
Tito's is number 1. Yep.
Black Velvet.
Number 2. Yep.
Probably.
Yep.
I bet Captain Morgan's is in there.
Jeez, that's 3.
Is it 3?
Yeah.
4, what did we say? Oh, bourbon. Probably Jim Beam.
No, Crown Royal.
Oh, Crown Royal.
And then 5.
Fireball?
Dude.
Is it Fireball?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, did you read this report before? My word.
It's pretty good.
That's insane. I'm blown away. And then local is Blue Ox.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cedar Ridge.
Oof.
Revelton. And Swell. Now, I'll be honest. I hadn't heard of any of those except for Cedar Ridge. I've heard of Cedar. Sure. I hadn't heard of it. What happened. Like, where did these local... So this is actually one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about is I still remember the day when we had maybe... I like Templeton Rye was the Iowa brand, and that was pretty much it. That was it.
Yeah.
So what changed?
It's a shame we're not in the top 5. Or I don't own any of Templeton anymore.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I mean, Templeton at one point, we were in the top 10 overall.
Yeah,
in
national.
the state of Iowa. No,
wasn't it?
Of just
you were a big national pick.
Brands sold in Iowa. We were in the top 10. Now we're not even in the top 5. Of Iowa brands. I
remember in the day being a hashtag TR spotting. I remember following the hashtag and I couldn't get any. I remember like posting up and knowing where my places were to get it and grabbing 2 bottles when I was there. I totally remember that. Wasn't then. Still, I'm not a heavy drinker.
Yep.
But if I'm going to drink something, I want it to be nice.
Well, it was awesome because the history of Templeton Rye, even back in the old days when it was illegal, you kind of had to be a wise gentleman and know someone who knew someone to get it. Well, history kind of repeated itself, and I would have friends, oh man, I can't find any Templeton.
Right.
Then I had other friends who were like, I know a place. And it was just sort of like interesting to know the people who complained about it weren't as close to me as the people who found a way to get it. And I was always admired that.
I remember going to, when I was traveling, I would go places and they'd be really proud if they could get a bottle. And they were charging so much per shot. And I'd be like, oh, and they'd be like, oh, you're from Iowa. That's where Templeton Rye, like this, it was a brand there. I mean, it's different now. It's kind of it's just another local brand now, but it was very, very different back then. But
I sold my shares in 2016.
Oh, wow. It's been a while.
So it's been a while. But yeah, I remember, we were only in Iowa for 4 years. Or I'm sorry, we're only in Iowa for 1 year. Then we were only in Iowa and Illinois for 4 years.
Yeah.
And our third market was always going to be San Francisco. Very sophisticated drinking culture. They've been drinking Napa wines for 30 years, 50 years. And I would go out there and go to cool bars and be like, I'm Scott Bush, Templeton Rye whiskey. Oh man, Jeff in the back's from Iowa. He brought us a bottle. Like everybody loved it. We don't serve it. We keep it, under here.
That's funny.
And then I would say to them, well, we're trying to come up with our list of the best bars in town to carry the product. And they're, oh man, we have to be on that list. But we like totally flipped the switch on these guys, flipped the script on these guys. Because most brands come out and, totally suck up to these bartenders. We went in totally different side and we're like, explain to us why, you should be on the list to gets to bottle of Templeton
You just
Rye.
would walk into there with no appointment and just say, explain to us what didn't. Like,
well, I wouldn't say it that overtly.
Oh,
it
I was going to
much
say,
more
I just
subtle
say,
than that, Justin.
I would just say, bro, get lost.
Yeah,
Who are you?
No, I would humbly introduce myself and explain that I was the Templeton Rye guy, and it would kind of just go from there.
That's funny. So, what happened between the Templeton Rye days when Templeton Rye was kind of on an island, and now, which it seems like there's a liquor store, they're making their own booze here in Iowa on almost literal. I know what the word literally means, everybody. Literally every street corner. It seems like it's going to be literally every street corner. And I mean that literally because someone in my neighborhood's making their own stuff too.
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
I don't know the number, the current number of distillers in Iowa, but it's a lot.
It's a lot, dude.
Well, I think, Justin, it's like everything else, and it's similar to the beer. Our industry is really struggling. The craft spirits and craft beer industry is very much struggling because of this. There's so much competition now that, even a Hy-Vee in a small town in Iowa, you walk in to get a bottle of whiskey and there's 200 brands on the shelf.
Totally different stuff.
So It makes it very, very difficult. I mean, you know, unfortunately for me, our friends in the industry, there's like one less every week. Somebody shuts down and decides to get a real job. Certainly a lot of breweries are doing it, but a lot of distilleries, you know, I told someone the other day, I think if you look around, there'll be half as many distilleries in the country in 5 years.
Why the trend, though? Was there a law change? Was there a regulation change? Was there a market opportunity? Why such a crazy overnight change?
Certainly a law change. Well, I mean, I'll tell you very honestly, a whole generation of people wanted to become the next Templeton Rye.
Oh, really? Okay.
Or some of our peers, my peers way back in that day, you know, Angel's Envy, High West, we all started at the same time. And you know, everybody had pretty great success, made a lot of money, and, you know, we were kind of famous for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think a lot of people chase that. There's always been, you know, a romance associated with making booze, and I think people enjoyed that. And the thing is now, if you have to go in and compete on the shelf with the big guys, you're totally screwed.
Oh, you have to wave the local flag, otherwise you have no shot?
Yeah, and essentially, I mean, we sell most of our spirit right at the distillery. And
Foundry does.
Yeah. Yep. It's hard to even get in, you know, regionally into retailers at this juncture.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Regionally?
Yeah. So
why is that? Just again, because there's so many options.
And it's, you know, it's sort of like if you were playing poker and you have to spend $30 million just to get a seat at the table before you even get a card.
Sure.
So it's challenging.
Have tariffs had a positive or negative effect on local? Because, you know, you'd think, I remember I like Scotch. I love Scotch. And all of a sudden the tariffs come online and boom, Scotch is crazy expensive.
Right.
And so I think a lot of other people started switching back to American whiskey. Right. And so have the tariffs changed consumption patterns in the U.S. or even consumption patterns in Europe? Because I remember being in Paris and Vienna, and they put Bullet on a little pedestal, and they light it, and they're like, "Oh, Bullet! This is like." I'm like, Over in the United States, we're kind of like just. I don't know, middle of the road.
Well, it's a Diageo product.
Yeah, it's not like really popular. Like it's fine, I guess. But I just thought it was hilarious that over there they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing.
Sure.
So have the tariffs, has that stuff changed the market at all?
I don't think, certainly not for local people. I think there's been some switching that you alluded to between, macroeconomically, Scotch has been in a decline. I mean, Scotch was huge in the 70s and even the 80s. The American whiskeys, you know, really started to become popular in the late 80s and 90s and turn of the century, certainly. But, you know, I don't know what tariffs have done to exacerbate that, or if it's just been a big picture trend.
How about like over in Europe? Because when I went over there, I was... I don't know if I should have been surprised, but I've been going over there for 3 years now for various business things, and like American bourbon's cool.
Oh yeah.
Like they love it. And has this been a trend for a while, or is this a recent development?
I would say it's 15, 20 years. I went over there I was on they had a craft spirits part of the Distilled Spirits Council, which is basically like the pact for booze.
Mm-hmm.
And we all went over there, gosh, probably like 2011 to Berlin to a big, you know, booze thing. And there was all the American products were together, which was kind of funny because we were with Brown Foreman and all those guys. All the craft guys were with them. And yeah, there was certainly a lot of enthusiasm for American whiskeys in the German world.
So here, Black Velvet, this is what I wanted to get back to. Yeah. But like, can I, maybe this is show suicide, and you can remain perfectly silent if you want to. But Black Velvet? Really? Like, if I was going to make a list of bourbons I was going to drink, not only would Black Velvet be on the bottom of the list, but I don't know if you might have to pay me to drink it.
Yeah.
Like, it is not good. And so, is it just a cost thing where, like, Iowans are just like, screw it, I'm not going to pay a ton of money for this. I don't care. I'm not going to extend my pinky and drink it in a perfect bourbon glass, Justin. I just want, like, is this what's going on? Is it a cost thing? Is it, what is up with that?
Bro, I still have my older brother, a lot of my uncles. Yeah. They all drink Black Velvet and Coke. And I owned a whiskey company.
Wait a minute. Is that it? Is it Black Velvet Coke? It's a mixer?
I don't think many people drink Black Velvet as a neat or on the rocks. I think it would almost always be mixed.
There it is.
And I think I don't think a lot of that's drank at bars. I think a lot of that is at home. People mixing drinks in their house.
So that's not crazy. Well, I mean, it
makes more sense because there is a good value there. And if you're going to mix it with Coke, you're not buying a Foundry product.
No, I'm not buying a nice bourbon and mixing it with Coke. But, so, I'd probably mix like Jack because, Jack and Coke. I mean, I just don't want to have a Jack and Coke. But this actually answers the question, which is, and that makes more sense. If people are mixing it with Coke, I mean, it's not insane. Like, like you said, you don't want to adulterate or ruin a nice bourbon with Coke.
Sure.
So that does make a little bit more sense.
Like ketchup on your steak.
Yeah. I'm really surprised to hear you say, and maybe, I don't know if it's an Iowa thing or a United States thing, that Scotch is trending out. Like, I thought Scotch was getting more popular, but that's not true.
Well, I mean, I think certainly some brands are. The popular Scotches back in the 70s would have been like the equivalent of the Black Velvets, Cutty Sark and J&B and some of those. I mean, those were $12 bottles of booze. High-end scotches in the $70, $80, over $100 range, I'm sure are trending up. But I think that the lower-end stuff is trending down with a lot of switching to American whiskeys.
Now, I will say, like, vodka, Tito's taking the #1 slot. I know it used
Tito's
to be...
is a juggernaut.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Now,
Unbelievable.
It used to be Black Velvet in the #1 slot in Iowa. Now it's Tito's.
Yeah.
Is that, again, people are mixing?
No, I think it's, well,
I mean, they have to be mixing something, but...
I think Tito's is mostly due to women drinking more healthy, but Tito's, people always drank vodka for that reason.
Really?
But Tito's has just taken over the vodka world. In the old days, you used to have, Kettle One and name your Chopin, Grey Goose, etc. Yeah. Well, I mean, those were $40, $50 vodkas from Europe. And here came Tito's, a 1999 American-made product, and absolutely ate all their lunches.
How did it take over so quickly? Because one time it didn't exist, and then it was everywhere. It seems like it happened in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the first really well-priced and well-distributed American vodka, and I think that the European ones were somewhat pretentious and somewhat confusing to people.
Oh.
I mean, that's just my
The European
idea.
Pretentiousness. So we were talking about regulations earlier, and I may or may not know some people that go over state lines to get their liquor from Minnesota. I may or may not know these people. You know who you are, which we've been told by the state of Iowa, not we, but I think the state of Iowa said something like, well, technically it's illegal to do that. I'm like, you know what, guys, zip it.
There's a lot of technically in our industry.
Anyway, why is it so much cheaper to go over to Minnesota? Because it's not like Minnesota is just pricing it lower. It's because Minnesota actually gets it lower. And we have laws here that actually drive the cost up significantly. The liquor gross I actually have these numbers because the state gave them to me. Liquor gross profit remained at 33%, generating, here we go, $151 million for the state of Iowa. They gave out almost 14,000 alcohol licenses, permits, and certificates, and revenue from just the license fees was $15 million. But the interesting thing there is the $150 million. And I know the answer to this one. I don't know the nuance here, which is you do know this. How are they making so much money off booze? Like, how are the laws really messed up here?
Well, so first of all, the 21st Amendment to the U.S. Constitution repealed prohibition. It also mandated the 3-tier system of alcohol. So you have producers, you have distributors, and you have retailers. In most industries, that middle tier has kind of gone away, right? Costco buys direct from the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Our industry, they're legal monopolies. And in fact, 17 states, the state is actually that middle tier. So they're called control states, which Iowa is one of. And, there's pros and cons to all of that stuff. There's some great things about control states. There's some really frustrating things about control states. But in Iowa, it's very simple. We have a bottle of booze we sell for $10 to the state of Iowa. They mark it up 50%. So they would then sell it to Hy-Vee for $15. Hy-Vee would sell it to you for $22, whatever it would be. So that middle tier, that markup in Iowa, it's a percentage base, so it's a little different. But it tends to be higher than most states, including Minnesota, which, then the end price to the consumer will be less if the different percentages are lower along the way.
So Iowa is essentially the middleman, and they're forcibly, by law, inserting themselves as a middleman and just making revenue with absolutely zero competition whatsoever. They just do whatever they want.
Well, yeah. I mean, they ultimately answer to citizens or whomever it would be.
Voters,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's...
Is part of you like watching what you say because
No, not at all.
Because they're kind of your boss?
No, we had an extremely Administrator Steve Larson is
just checking. Are you okay? Do we need to send someone?
He's just recently retired, and he was really quite good to work with, and he particularly wanted to help Iowa businesses if possible, and they did help us, pass some laws to do that. But even in non-control states, Justin, it's very similar to a state organization. I mean, these are big,
because they have a monopoly
stodgy,
of some kind.
Well, there's two. In the old days, there were 8 or 9. They've all consolidated, so it's sort of pick your poison. And I mean, in their defense, distributors, they want to do the right thing, and they want to sell your product. But at the end of the day, if they have 1,200 brands in their portfolio, we think ours should be number one, but realistically, there's no way that's going to be true.
Yeah, but isn't this a good excuse for the free market to decide that then? If one distributor wants to focus on just 3 bourbon brands, okay.
Well,
and if the other one
started to happen. That started to happen.
It started?
They all consolidated.
Uh-huh.
In the old days growing up, 2 generations ago, like the person who started a brand and the person who started the distributorship would grow up together. Well, that's long since gone, and there's just like 2 big distributors in each market. But now there has been some smaller guys show up that are really just trying to do the craft stuff, and they're offshoots because they know that someone like us is not going to get the time and attention that we would like from the distributor, and we don't deserve to. I mean, I wouldn't give us that time. So these guys are starting to pop up, and they're more niche, they hustle, and pros and cons again, though. They don't have nearly the muscle that the big boys do.
Yeah, I mean, is there any hope on the horizon of getting rid of that model and allowing a more free market and driving some costs down? And I want you to talk about this too, because you've touched on, I think we've had this discussion where you briefly touched on it, but you have this wall at Foundry Distilling, like where you can't pass through this wall or something. Like there's some structure of the building that you had to create because laws prohibit you from like selling what you produce where you produce it. You have to it has to leave the building, come back in or something. Can you this is again one of those wacky laws. Can you describe that?
Well, that's what it used to be that way. Used to be, we had to literally send our product to Ankeny, to the state liquor warehouse, have it sent back, and then we could sell it there. I mean, everybody thinks that's ridiculous.
Of course.
Especially
because it is ridiculous.
Well, yeah, it's a pain, but even the environmental part of it is just so needless and unnecessary. But yeah, we have like a taped off. It's not a physical barrier, but this is the tax paid version. So now we can put the product there and electronically transfer it through the state of Iowa where we don't have to move. And then I put up a sign that said welcome to Ankeny, and
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Just so more for my team to make sure they understood what it meant. But once the product goes there, we pay the tax through the state, and then it's basically like it was sent back to us.
So you do it electronically, but you still have the physical separation of items at Foundry, correct?
Yep.
And it's like once I move it from this chunk of floor to this chunk of floor, then we log it through the state. We pay the taxes on it. We say it's. I mean, I guess that's a little better. It's still hilarious.
Yeah.
It's still silly, but I guess that's a little better.
I mean, I would be all about being able to sell direct and doing, and even shipping on spirits. So spirits has always been the stepchild of the booze industry. Wine, beer. You could ship wine to almost all 50 states.
Because that's complete, right? Because wine and beer, completely
you can't get
different
drunk
laws.
on those.
No, it's never happened in the history of the United States. But these wine and beer, completely different laws, right?
Yep. Correct.
You don't produce any beer or wine down there at Foundry, do you?
We have a wine license. We do actually produce.
Oh, do you?
We produce a mead, which is essentially a honey wine.
Okay.
In conjunction with Maytag Dairy Farms. They have their own bees out there. It's really quite cool Iowa story. Yeah.
That's cool.
So they have their own bees.
Tell that.
And we use honey from the Maytag Dairy Farm bees. We ferment it to about a 14% honey wine mead. But then we actually age that stuff for 6 weeks in used whiskey barrels.
What?
Yeah, you got to try it, bud. It's really, really cool product. Maytag Mead, it's called.
Maytag Mead. This is available now?
It is at Foundry Distilling Company, Historic Valley Junction.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about Foundry, because it's not a new thing. It's been there for a while, but it's kind of new for a lot of people who are like long, like old school Iowans, been here for a while. It's not just a distillery that makes stuff and sells stuff. You kind of have a few programs going on.
Yep.
Can you explain the model?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very different than the Templeton days. We make great whiskey, and we started in 2018. So we're 6 years in. So we have all this great whiskey that's ready to go. But we do have our own brands. We have a Foundry Bourbon, a Foundry Single Malt, and a Foundry 5-grain whiskey, which are wonderful. But our main product is what we call the Private Barrel Club, where individuals and groups come in and do their own branded whiskey. So you could have Brady's Best with your picture on the label, and
that would sell great.
It's awesome.
Let me tell you.
It's super fun for me and for my team, because the vast majority of these people are coming in for some type of business or personal milestone.
Sure, yeah.
25 years in business, grandpa's retiring, bachelor party, whatever it would be. And they're all, seriously, every group we have has been very cool to work with. And we make them really happy. Like, they get their own whiskey brand. I mean, that's really cool. That's our primary product. We do a lot of events down there just because our space, I know you've been there. It's beautiful. It's very, very cool. Thanks. And then we do our Brewer Distiller Alliance, which is pretty unique in the industry, where we work with different brewers around the country. The first 2 steps to making booze, whether it's whiskey or beer, are the same. You convert starches to sugars, you add yeast and ferment them. With whiskey, you do 2 more steps. You you distill it to make it a much higher proof spirit, and then you barrel age it. So, for example, we've worked with Confluence Brewery. The recipe, the grain bill for their Des Moines IPA was made at Confluence, sent to us, and then we ferment, distill, barrel age it, and turn it into a whiskey. So it's kind of like mind-blowing to think you can take a sip of the beer and a sip of the whiskey, and they both started their lives as the same liquid.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned barrel aging.
Yep.
How do you do that in Iowa? Because I've been to Kentucky. The temperature's a little different there.
Yep.
And they have the giant warehouses that are outside that...
Brick houses.
Yes, thank you. And they're not, I don't think they're temperature controlled. No. I think they're just outside. So, I mean, they're controlled to a kind of, like they have
old
vents.
Ones are not.
They have vents they can open up on the side. That's pretty much it. How do we do that in Iowa, where it's, I mean, right today, as we're doing this, it's freezing. So how do you do that here?
Well, Iowa's actually a great place to store whiskey because, well, you want a range of temperatures. You want hot summers, cold winters.
Because you want expansion, contraction?
Indeed.
Whoa.
Well, and it's interesting, Justin, like, I go down there a lot. The new rick houses they're building actually are temperature controlled. And what they do is they'll turn the heater on for a couple of weeks in the middle of winter and then shut them off and open all the doors and windows and like
cool it down.
Yeah,
You gotta
like
be
an extra
kidding
season
me.
in there.
So Kentucky's stealing off Iowa's way of making whiskey.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I always say good grain and good water is what makes good booze. And there's no reason that Kentucky's known for having better whiskey than Iowa is.
So mostly right now it's a branding thing, which, a lot of liquor is, but mostly it's a branding thing. Before I let you go, I need to put in a personal request. So I have recently learned that like glyphosate and certain things like that, this was years ago. Now RFK is like doing Health and Human Services maybe, and this is all in the news. But I realized that like organic grains for me actually make a difference, even though something's been distilled.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I have like Cedar Ridge, Templeton Rye, Foundry, great stuff. But if I have it, I get a little congested. And if I have like scotches or stuff that aren't made with like domestic grain that's been treated with, I don't know if it's pesticide. I honestly don't know what it is. I have a totally different reaction. So is there any organic whiskey coming from Foundry in the future?
That's a great question. We have done a couple of our private barrels
Put you on the
that
spot.
way.
Oh, really? You've done private barrels that way?
Yep.
Fascinating.
Yep. Where people either like maybe they had allergies or something. I can't remember.
Yeah. See, I don't know what it is either.
Well, but then we also do a twist on our private barrel thing, as we call our estate bourbon, where we actually use corn grown at someone's facility on their farm.
Oh, dude,
so
that's cool.
Yeah. Estate
Smart.
wine is where all the grapes come from the same winery.
Uh-huh.
So we call it estate bourbon. But yeah, just picture that where not only do you have your own whiskey with your own label, but it's actually made with corn from your family farm.
So I could source my own grain, bring it in there, and what's the aging process? 5 years or something? Or is it shorter than that? I don't know what I'm talking about, so that's why you're in here.
We use 30-gallon barrels.
Uh-huh.
So typically we will age product like 2.5 to 4 years.
That's not terrible.
We'll create a really good whiskey. Goes quick, bud.
Yeah.
And it's fun if you come down and do a barrel, because most folks will come in every quarter or so, and you can bring in your buddies or your family or whoever, and then our distiller will sit with you and talk about what a great job you did on your whiskey. And it's very fun, and it's interesting to taste it as it goes along, because, it obviously...
Do you get to do the tastings too?
Me?
No. Like the person who barrels it.
Yeah, of course.
Dude,
of
come
course.
on, that's cool.
Oh, it's really cool. Like, people love it. They feel very special when they come in, and, we tell all their friends, what a great job they did.
And it's a good story.
Yeah, for sure.
That's very cool. Scott Bush, the founder of Foundry Distilling. Dude, this is, if I could say, I feel like this is like a laid back kind of interview. It's almost like this happened in a speakeasy. I can assure everybody watching on video on YouTube that it happened in our studio. You're always a laid back, calm guy. Really appreciate you coming on the Iowa podcast,
I got a lot of whiskey stories. I'm drinking LaCroix, so not as many will come out. But yeah, I appreciate it, bud.
Thanks for coming on the show. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.